So Annie Leibovitz, she's known for, and I'm showing you work out of her book. Pardon the glare. I mean, I've done my best to kind of avoid it, but she's known for her celebrity photography. This is an example of Brad Pitt. If you saw Thelma and Louise, you see he's basically dressed for the part. Um, you'll see as we go through this that she has a whole range of her style. One of them is this kind of staged photograph. But I think she's known primarily as a celebrity photographer, celebrity portrait photographer, or an environmental portrait, which means portraitist, which means that she captures people in their environment, or in this case, in the environment of the film that he was in, Thelma and Louise. But we're also going to take a look at some of her other genres. Now, I love this photograph. I think it's just so well captured. She obviously set it up, staged it. I mean, it's in this motel room where it was part of Thelma and Louise. He's wearing the cowboy boots, and his whole, attitude and demeanor is right out of that film. So that was obviously very previous to pressing the shutter, well set up, and that's in her pre-production. But she didn't always, she wasn't always a celebrity photographer. She, as I said, started out at the San Francisco Art Institute, like me. She had the good timing and good fortune to be hired by Rolling Stone magazine, which was a brand new magazine, I'm going to say 1970, she came out of school and they needed a photographer, and there she was. They were just getting off the ground, so they weren't looking for anybody famous. She wasn't famous. So she began, like many of us, straight out of school with a camera in her hands and started photographing for the magazine. This is not from Rolling Stone. This is one of her photographs from 1994. I'm going to move the camera a little bit so you can see this. Okay, there we go. Okay. There's a punctuation point. There's a person in the frame. Something I always like to see if you heard my critiques. And this is in Jordan. So this is not a celebrity photograph. It's not even a particularly, we wouldn't call it a portraiture, but we would call it we could call it an environmental portrait to some degree. This is, I'm going to pan here. This is another photograph from Jordan of the desert. It looks like water, but it's actually the desert. This is a landscape photograph. She's not known for landscape photography, but I know from talking to her, in which, I've seen her photographs, that she really did want to get more into landscape photography, and she took some workshops from Ansel Adams, got to know him and the family. Another photograph from Jordan. Sorry about the glare there. Again, you wouldn't see this photograph and go, wow, that's an Annie Leibovitz photograph. It doesn't have anything iconic about her, I don't think, in the photograph. I think that we're seeing also someone emerging from a different genre to try to capture something else. And that's what she was doing here. This is from the Photographer's Life, 1990 to 2005. This is a photograph from her studio. I love it because the frames, frames within frames are really cool. But I'm going to just say it could have been photographed by almost any one of us. This isn't, I don't consider remarkable. It's cool because of the clouds and it's cool because of the view, but it doesn't have her stamp on it. We get into more of her other photographs, and she took a lot of photographs of her family. This is her mom and dad. I'm going to show you in a minute one of, I believe, what she considered her favorite photograph. But this is a lesson we can learn from her. Photograph the people that are near you. Don't be afraid to pull your camera out. She photographed them constantly, as you can see in these pages. She was always photographing. This is her brother and her dad. Always photographing them. Now, this isn't a snapshot. It's actually, it could have been a snapshot, but it really isn't. It's really well composed. The background is, not intruding into the photograph. These two guys are composed within the frame nicely. And there's a lot of life there. Obviously, they love her. And that's coming through this photograph. And I'm going to read you a piece of advice from her in a minute. Here's some other photographs. Her dad, her brother, and one of her babies. It's just really well composed. The dad leaning into the frame. It just gives that nice curve into it. And we're looking at the baby. We're drawn towards the baby because of where they're looking. These are some photographs of her mom, different frames. Let me move this a little bit. So you can see mom's playing around on the beach. And again, these are not snapshots, but they are people doing things in everyday life. Don't forget the power of that. Don't ignore that. Here's another of her family. And we've all taken these kinds of photographs. She takes them constantly. You can see it. There's just a constant stream of her photographs. And this is probably a good point to bring out some of her advice. So let me pull this out here. So I'm going to show you from this book here. And this is called Annie Leibovitz at Work. It's a story about her as a photographer. 10 most asked questions in the back of the book. What advice do you have for a young photographer who is just starting out? You'll see these examples are perfect. I've said about 1 million times that the best thing a young photographer can do is to stay close to home. Obviously, she's doing that here. Start with your friends and family, the people who put up with you. That's important. The people who will put up with you pulling your camera out and shooting them all the time. Discover what it means to be close to your work, to be intimate with a subject. Measure the distance between that and working with someone you don't know as much about. Now, that's really good advice. You want to be able to get close to people, and I hear many people, maybe not many, but a lot of people have trouble with that. You got to get used to it and start with the people who will put up with you, just like she says. Before you go out and you start shooting a celebrity up close, be comfortable with your friends and family. They will put up with you. Of course, there are many good photographs that have nothing to do with staying close to home. And I guess what I'm really saying is that you should take pictures of something that has meaning to you. Underscore that. Dan Milner has talked about that. Something that has meaning to you. Why are you pointing the camera at this person or place? It needs to have meaning for you. So look for that meaning. Have it be part of your story. When I was a young photographer at Rolling Stone, I learned what I did mattered. This may have been because I was published, but whether you're published or not, you have to care about what you do. You have to care about what you do. You might even seem to be obsessive about it. And that's really, really good advice. Care about what you do, and that's going to come across in your photography. And you can see that advice is really how she developed her photography. She was constantly photographing these people that were close to her in her life. This is an interesting portraiture of Michael Jordan. Now, I just want to call some points to mind here. There's no breathing room around this. There's no head space, very little, I should say. And there's no space in front of him. If I were to take this photograph, I would definitely leave space in front of him. But she knows that, so she's trying to make a point. Normally, this is also in my book, Advancing Your Photography. If somebody's looking in a certain direction, leave space in that part of the frame. There is none. It's right up to the edge there. There's space behind him here, but there's very little space in front of him here, just a tiny bit. That, by the way, is my puppy, River, who wants to be part of the show. The lighting is very simple. The background is very simple. It's just a gray backdrop, and it's really lit to to bring the reflection out on his earring and the reflection in his ear, the shininess, I should say. I think it's a single light source. Very, very simple setup. There's so much to choose from. Where do you start? These are, I'm just kind of flicking through until I want to find another example. This is Nelson Mandela. Beautiful portrait. I'm going to pull back here a little bit so you can see this better. Beautiful man and a beautiful portrait of this man. Very simple lighting. I believe we could call this Vermeer lighting because, let's take a look. Let me fix these pages here. So she was obviously familiar with Vermeer lighting, as we all should be. It's lit from one side. Now, he generally did it the other way around. It doesn't really matter which way you light. But the light source is over here, and then this side of his face is in shadow. And that's pretty typical of Vermeer lighting. It's not quite Rembrandt lighting. Rembrandt lighting would have a triangle here, a shadow. So we'll call it Vermeer lighting. And you can see on his shirt, there's the light source. The light source is right where that glare is. That's doing its job. It's back here somewhere over on this side. And very simple, plain backdrop. Nothing around him in terms of being an environmental portrait, but I look at his expression. He's very open. He's allowing her to enter his world. There's a lot of, what I would call wisdom coming from this man, who obviously is very wise. And again, it's a beautiful portrait that any one of us could do. You don't even need fancy lighting. You just use a window. You could just have an open window, as I do in this room, that's lighting this side. And, I don't want to be in shadow, so I do have another LED over here bouncing light off. But it's really simple, you guys. It's the simplest light setup that you could ever make. You've got it in your home, in your apartment. You've got a window there, and you can set your subject up so the light is just hitting one side of their face and there's shadow on the other side. Get a plain black backdrop like she has, and you're in business. Pretty cool. A lot we can learn here. This is a great photograph of Mick Jagger. She toured. One of the things she did early on with Rolling Stone is she toured with the Stones, so she knew him by the time she had photographed this. This is 1992. And another very simple setup: a bed, crumpled sheets, and a white wall, which is just the wall of that room. How is it lit? Well, the light source is coming from this side, but because his face isn't totally in shadow, there's possibly a reflector going on here, but it's not really reflecting much light onto his face. So my guess is it's just ambient light that's bouncing around that's hitting him, because the main part of his body, the back here, is where the light source is lighting up. But very simple, great geometry, very kind of like pensive look. Obviously, this man is in really good shape. He runs 5 miles a day and he does these 3-hour shows. He's remained in good shape. So we're seeing that, the physicality of him, but we're really seeing something much more important, which is his mood and his expression. Getting moods into your photographs is so important. Getting that expression, capturing that emotion. How do you find it? Sometimes you have to direct your subject, and she's not adverse to doing that. Please subscribe and enable the bell so you don't miss any of our new shows. Like the video and please share it and leave your comments. I love hearing from you. And remember to get out and capture your own images of life.